There you go.
Okay, so this is our cast of characters for today. I'm the one without the beard.
Thank God.
Someday, so.
Rick grew his hair long.
I know.
You had it back at Sunfield.
And it's my responsibility to say these are all our opinions and all our information, and we're just not the library's opinion. That's the public service side of this. And so what we'll be doing is first, David Hackley will be giving a presentation to kind of acquaint everybody, bring everybody up to speed on what coins were in circulation during the Civil War and what were started before the war and would probably have been circulating during the war. And then Rick will give a little background on what was happening in the mints and what was printed during the war. I'll do a little talk about tokens. We'll have a couple refreshment breaks so everybody can enjoy some of the things that have been donated to this event. And we have a couple flyers that I would like to make sure everybody gets a copy of. And it's just a free form. The other thing I'd like to do is introduce Chyrl, who's behind you, and Chyrl is filming for our website. So if anybody has an objection to potentially being in a picture, let us know now. But you know, it's just going to, anything, if you want to be edited out, we can edit you out. But it's really going to be primarily for our website and for potentially raising funds for a book that we're publishing as well. And the book is going to be called Money, Mayhem, and Might, and be discussing many of these other things as well on how the Civil War changed our money. And so anyhow, Dave, do you want to come on up? And Dave, you're actually in Sharpsburg, right? And is a retired librarian and has hundreds of coins of his own. A few, more than 10.
Yeah.
So what?
Well, thank you for that introduction.
There you go.
And
Just point and click.
my role here is a little more than to set the stage for Becky and Rick, who each have interesting talks to give. So I don't want to take up much of their time. I want to show you some pictures, pretty pictures, I hope, of the coins that the Mint produced during before and during the Civil War. And say a few words, if I can remember. My days as a public speaker are behind me, and I can't remember a lot of the things that I mean to say, but to say a few words about the things that went on behind the mintage and the issuance of these coins. To start with, I'm no expert. I'm just a collector and a student of this, and you guys probably know more than I do. So don't hesitate to correct me if I utter any grave errors, but don't interrupt me with irrelevancies either, because I don't want to take up their time. I just want to show you these pictures. Now, as you know, the United States, when it first became a country, inherited a chaotic currency system that was the result of many, many years of separate colonies trading amongst themselves and with overseas powers, and many, many different kinds of currencies were in circulation. People used foreign currency. They used Spanish and Mexican currency primarily in the form of the Spanish dollar and its fractions. And other kinds of coins and bills circulated too before the Mint actually was established when the country was formed. The first United States coins as such didn't come out until about 1792. So by the time the Civil War was upon us, the country was really only about 70 years old. I mean, that's younger than we are, right? And a lot of this currency chaos was still going on. So there were numerous different kinds of coins in circulation. I'm not going to show all the things that had to be disposed of before a uniform currency could be introduced, but I just wanted to set that out there so that you know that what I'm showing you is not the only kind of currency coins that were built. Now, by the 1850s, silver coinage had just about disappeared from circulation. It's because huge discoveries of gold in California in the late 1840s had brought so much gold onto the world market that it had increased the price of silver accordingly. So as the price of gold went down according to the increased supply, the value of silver as reckoned in gold dollars went up. So the bullion value of silver in the 1850s was higher than the face value of the silver coins that were in circulation at that time. And so what happened was that speculators bought up almost all of the silver coinage that they could get their hands on. And it was exported to Europe and the Caribbean, where it was worth more than face value and was melted down and sold as ingots for bullion. So silver was really in short supply. In addition, very little silver was being brought to the mint for the same reason. Previous to that time, people and companies had brought their own silver to the mint to be coined and received in exchange. So let's get going here. I want to show you first the braided hair copper coins. That's the half cent. And the large cent, it's the big sister. These had been in circulation since the beginning in several different forms. By the time the 1850s were well underway, these had outworn their welcome literally and figuratively. They were too heavy to carry in your pocket. They were filthy. Most of them were worn out. They were all kinds of different metals because of the difficulty the mint had in procuring flans, coining metal in the early days. And on top of that, they weren't legal tender. No act of Congress had made these copper minor coins legal tender. So they could be refused in change in commerce. And as a result, they tended to pile up in merchants' drawers, and they were unwelcome. Besides that, they cost the mint too much to make. The cost of getting the planchets for copper coins was getting out of hand. They had to be obtained from overseas, and it was just a no-go proposition. So by the 1840s, by 1850 really, it was time for a change, and everybody knew it. So many proposals were put forth, and many different alloys were proposed. But here's what they look like in your pocket: filthy, dirty old large cents. The alloy that was proposed for the new coinage was 88% copper and 12% nickel. And these tended to be kind of a whitish color, and they were hard to strike up. But they were popular. Let me tell you how that all came about. There was an act of Congress in 1857 that abolished the half cent and the large cent and provided for the smaller flying eagle cent. The same act called in all the Mexican and Spanish and foreign coins, silver coins, that were in circulation in exchange for these. So in the mint yard, there were two booths that they set up in the mint yard to introduce this coin. One of them had a sign on it that said cents for cents, and the other sign said cents for silver. And people were to bring their old large cents to one booth, and their silver coins, their foreign silver coins, to the other booth, and they were exchanged for these. And these were given out by the hundreds. They were popular at first. They were a curiosity. Many of them were hoarded. But after that, the mint just poured out hundreds and thousands of them until pretty soon they started to pile up in merchants' drawers too, because as before, they had not taken the trouble to make them legal tender, so they could be refused. Question?
Yes. Actually, how large was the large cent?
The large cent, in terms of millimeters, I couldn't tell you.
I mean, was it the size like the quarter now?
It was
or-
between the size of a quarter and a $50. I would say it was slightly
Okay.
smaller than a $50.
And is
This
this
was
slim,
this
the
is
size it
19
is
millimeters.
now?
Yeah, this is 19 millimeters, but it was thicker than the common pen, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. After this had been in production for a couple years,
Up the size of a quarter?
objections came from the mint because the hardness of the metal was hard on the coining presses. It was breaking the dies. Nickel is a lot harder than copper. And so that was a problem, and the coins weren't striking up very well because of that problem. The eagle's wing tips and the leaf tips on the reverse often were faint because the presses couldn't generate quite enough pressure to bring up all the details. So something else had to happen. Now, in the meantime, let me get my notes straight here. Let me say first that this design was chosen to be produced as a first try on the small sense. But because of striking difficulties and because of other things, it was soon replaced by the Indian head design because it had lower relief. Now here's the Indian head design. This is still in the same copper nickel, which was at 12% nickel, and they were called white cents because in circulation they tended to have a lighter color than the large cents. This was chosen to supplant the Flying Eagle design because it had lower relief in legends and devices, and it struck up better. So it was a more satisfactory product for the mint. At the same time, the Civil War set in, and there was a coin shortage because due to the imminence of civil conflict, people began to hoard coins that had any bullion value at all, and that included the copper nickel cents. So in place of those, various tokens were used, and Becky's going to give a very interesting talk about these, so I won't belabor it, but there were two different kinds of tokens mainly. There were merchants' tokens, which carried advertising for various companies that printed them, that minted them and gave them out, and there were tokens with patriotic themes that were related to Civil War issues. So they circulated side by side with the Flying Eagle cents and were made of a different metal. They were copper. They were actually made of a metal called French bronze, which was mostly copper but partly tin and zinc.